Welcome back. I hope you had a great Christmas. We're now in the home stretch, almost done. Just a few days left. Today we're going to talk about adolescence, so chapters 9 and 10. For this first video, we're going to talk about adolescent sexuality and some of the changes that are happening there. So we already know from our reading that adolescence, typically we tend to mark adolescence beginning with puberty. That may not always be the case, but puberty is that big physical change, that big physical sign of adolescence. Rapid changes are happening to the body, and a lot of those changes have to do with sexual parts of the body. So, what's going on sexually with adolescence? Well, the first thing that we see is that adolescents are developing a sexual identity. And so, what that means is that they are learning to manage their sexual feelings, they're maybe understanding sexual feelings for the first time and trying to figure out how to manage those things. They're learning to develop new forms of intimacy, so they are learning that the intimate relationship that maybe they have with their caregiver isn't the only type of intimacy that they can have, and so they're learning to develop new forms of intimacy, and they're learning to regulate their sexual behavior, much like we learn to regulate our emotions. They're learning to regulate their sexual behavior. When is it appropriate to act in a certain sexual way? When isn't it? How do I do that? Those types of things. So that's what adolescents are wrestling with as they develop this sexual identity. Now, sexual identity is going to be composed of several different things. It's going to be composed of activities and interests. It's going to be composed of their styles of behavior that they engage in, and it's going to be composed in the indication that they have towards sexual orientation. And we know that there are, speaking of orientation, some different developmental pathways for those adolescents who will identify as gay or lesbian. The patterns of initial attraction that they have, the same-sex attraction, is diverse and differing from person to person. Some will say that they were dealing with same-sex attractions in childhood, and others said that there was just kind of a gradual recognition of same-sex attraction and same-sex orientation throughout adolescence. It wasn't just a day where those adolescents maybe woke up and said, okay, today I am attracted to the same sex. We know that when we talk about this idea of behavior in as part of the sexual identity of adolescence, that we are dealing with a group of humans who are becoming sexually active for the first time. They're engaging in behaviors for the first time. They are experimenting and exploring. For many of them, they are looking at the role that non-vaginal sex might play in their sexual behavior, the role of oral sex or other types of sexual behavior, and whether that really counts as sex or not. We see adolescents engaging in very high-risk sexual behaviors. Usually what we mean by high risk is no contraceptive, or they're using a contraceptive but using it in the wrong way. We oftentimes in later adolescence see high-risk sexual behavior coupled with some other high-risk behaviors like binge drinking and drug use, those types of things. The big deal when it comes to behavior and experience is that many adolescents, especially early on in adolescence, they just aren't emotionally equipped to handle sexual experience. They're just not emotionally equipped to handle that physical experience of sex. I mentioned contraceptive use a minute ago as a risky behavior. Obviously, poor contraceptive use or no contraceptive use can lead to one of two big negative outcomes: one, unwanted or unintended pregnancy, and two, an STI. And the U.S., tends to rank number one or two in the world in both teen pregnancies and STI rates. That tells me that there's a disconnect somewhere in education. The big debate is with sexual education: do we promote abstinence-only programs, or do we promote comprehensive sex ed programs? And you know, me as a Christian, obviously, abstinence I believe in. I believe that sex is this beautiful, great thing designed for marriage, and it's at its best when it's in a marriage. But uh, I'm also a social scientist, and I understand that there is a need for comprehensive sex ed. One of the big questions is, well, if we teach these adolescents, if we teach teens how to use contraceptives, then they're just going to start having more and more sex. Actually, research tells us that that's not true. There is no link between knowledge of contraceptives, what they are, and how to use them correctly, and an increase in incidence for sexual intercourse. But there is a link in knowledge of contraceptive use and a decrease in STI and pregnancy rates. So we have to kind of balance that out. There are any number of other things that we might talk about with adolescence and sexuality, but we're going to leave it at that for right now. I encourage you to watch the video just below this one on formal operational thinking, and you can get some knowledge there of Piaget's final stage.